States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kathy, can you please start with introductions?
Kathy Notaro, Assistant District Clerk.
Mary Vitaliata, Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Education.
Anne Marie Brown Caliendo, Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Facilities. Stephanie Gordon, Board Trustee.
David Caston, Board Trustee.
Diana Akampora, Board Trustee.
Jack Feldman, Counsel to the Board of Education.
Kelly Fallon, Superintendent of Schools.
Eric Geringswald, Board President.
Betty DiSabato, Board Vice President.
Paul Peller, Board Trustee.
Adam Feinberg, Board Trustee.
John O'Farrell, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education.
Patrick Harrigan, Deputy Superintendent.
And before we get going, I'd just like to read the statement. Under the Open Meetings Law, the audio or videotaping of a public school board meeting is legal as long as it remains unobtrusive and does not disrupt or interfere with the deliberative process or the right of persons in attendance to observe or listen to the proceedings. Although the district is recording, the public should be advised that this meeting may appear in print or online, including YouTube or other websites, and may be used for any purposes, personal or political, as the individual taping the meeting sees fit. At this point in time, I will turn the meeting over to Mrs. Fallon.
Thank you, Mr. Geringswald. And this evening, Ms. Marone Caliendo, our Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Facilities, will continue bringing the community through the proposed 2016-17 school budget.
Thank you, Mrs. Fallon. So last meeting, we spoke about revenues, where we were at as of a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and tonight we'll speak about expenditures. If anyone falls asleep, we have you on camera, so just make believe you stay awake. So the budgeting process that we employ is a multifaceted process that we start really almost 8 months. We're really into a new budget year, and we start projecting for the following budget year. And we look at it in many different areas. So we have employees, we are an employee-driven business, we educate students, so all of us are here for that end purpose. We don't create an end product or item. So the employees are the majority of our expenditures, and those are located throughout our budget. So our budget document is a document that is hundreds of pages long, thousands of codes, and we have different object codes which identify what exactly is found in that particular budget area. So the object codes 150, 160, 800 are all for employees. It involves salaries and benefits. The second piece are contracted items, which are essentially our 400 code areas. It tells us that we're contracting for a service, whether it's BOCES or whether it's a contract for a maintenance item within our buildings, or other items including debt service or transferred capital are all considered contracted items. And then general items are object codes. We call them consumables, although items in our 200 code are not consumable, they're equipment, so they have a much longer shelf life. But essentially you're looking at textbooks, supplies, materials, and equipment. But basically the general items that we use to support our instructional programs. So we go through and literally code by code we go through and project out what we are going to have as a following year's budget, and that's really a many, many months long process. When we look at the process in its totality, the employees, which make up about, the costs associated with the employees make up about 80% of our budget, and that number doesn't vary from year to year, but here or at other districts. But about 80% of our budget is coming from salaries and benefits, and you can see those pieces in the green. When I'm projecting forward for salaries, I'm literally looking at person by person, working with my assistant superintendent and deputy superintendent colleagues, and working with, where are we staffing? Where are the programs going? Is there anything I need to know that's going to be changing to be able to roll forward these employees? Are contracts being negotiated? Are contracts in place? And I simply attach a person to a contract, and then I attach that contract to a salary amount or a benefit amount. So that process goes on behind the scenes for months and months. That's most of our work. We will be discussing tonight components of the budget process that involve changes from what we call roll forward. So a roll forward budget is looking at everyone we have here today, programs we have here today, and what will that cost us tomorrow. It doesn't anticipate or assume that, of course you have a program you should continue it. It assumes that that intelligent conversation is going on to make sure that the programs that we have are in fact the best for our students and our community. But a majority of the budget really is employees. It's made up of those salaries which we work through contractually within my office. The next largest piece are considered contracted items, and that includes BOCES. As I mentioned, it includes other items like contracted services we could be receiving for a repair of a piece of equipment, and then debt service, special aid, and transfer to capital. Those in totality amount to about 19% of the budget, and we'll speak about some of those. And then the general items are those consumable type items, textbooks, materials, and supplies. But we won't be talking about the whole $240 million plus budget, just the pieces that are different, because the rest of it is what we are expected to do from a fiscal responsibility perspective, which is make sure that everybody today is going to be able to be paid tomorrow based on contracts that are already negotiated. So as we go through what those drivers are, we have 7 main areas that I'll be referencing tonight to take you through where we see some changes, all very positive changes for next year. So we'll start with the enhanced and new instructional programs, and there are 4 general categories. These are categories, we've discussed them last board meeting, last Monday night. We had our administrators come in to speak about many of these items, but I'll take you through each of those general 4 categories. The net effect of all of that is $470,000, which we've already incorporated into the budget that we're working on. So when we look at clubs, we've talked about elementary clubs, including coding, engineering, exploring African American culture, the Imagination Playground, which was more like a maker space concept for the elementary buildings, Women in Science and Engineering Club, Internet Media, and Special Ed Life Skills Club. Those last 3 are at the high schools, and the first 5 are at the elementary buildings, and it's going to be equitably distributed, so every building is going to be able to benefit from those clubs. Maker spaces we also spoke about. I just put the definition there for the sake of anyone who doesn't have students who are in the middle school level. We had introduced this a year ago at West Hollow. It has been taken off and so well received by students that we are going to be expanding that out, adding to the West Hollow makerspace as well as expanding it out to the other secondary buildings. Again, we had this discussion last Monday night. The redesigned instructional spaces we spoke about at High School West. The Google-type classrooms, those are collaborative, cooperative-style classrooms, not your traditional desks and chairs, as well as a library-to-lounge concept at High School West, which is really in desperate need of updating that space to make it more user-friendly for students to collaborate. So those 2 items at High School West are included in as well. And then finally, we spoke about course offerings, a recording studio, broadcasting class at High School East, as well as the AP Computer Principles program, which Mr. Dunst spoke about, participation in the Composite Prototype Center, which Mr. Fagarazzo spoke about, as well as the Special Ed PAYS Lab, which was that kind of next level up of the life skills program for our special education students that Ms. Melfi spoke about. So all of that is included in as new enhanced instructional programs. So in terms of staffing, we are looking at a number of different components. We are financially benefiting from 14 retirees this year, which is a pretty large number in comparison to what we've seen in the past. And that's across the board: custodians, guidance counselors, social workers, teachers, 14 full-time equivalent teachers, or other employees who are retiring. We also have an E&L teacher, 1 full-time equivalent teacher, which is required to meet the Part 154 regulations. We had an add in last year's budget as well to meet those requirements as well, a much more significant add. We next have declining enrollment. We are still seeing some impact on that in terms of the staffing. We're going to be reducing, expecting to reduce 1 elementary teacher, and that will also give us a little bit of room for Mrs. Retaliata to be able to have some wiggle room for the incoming kindergartners who still come in and they still register through until I think September, when they start seeing buses and parents realize, oh, we were supposed to register for school. So we need to allow some flexibility for the splitting or breaking of classes so that we can manage our class sizes. Next we have within special ed, and we go through the staffing exercise, which my colleagues have been going through with our special education office. We're looking at needing 5 additional full-time equivalent teachers to meet the needs of our special education population. Next, we have lead security guards. As we continue to work through all of the different needs from a security perspective in our district, one of the things that we've identified is having lead security guards, our security staff pulling someone or pulling a number of folks from our existing staff who know what we do, who know our students, who know our buildings, and giving them a supervisory title. It's a very modest increase in their rate of pay. It's an hourly rate of pay. But what it would enable us to do is to have a supervisory eyes and ears at the buildings, working with the administrators at the buildings, instead of every single supervisory conversation needing to happen in my office with our head of security, who also is in charge of many, many other facets, important facets of the business office. So that would assist us in having more collaborative work with the buildings, which we're very excited about. Further improve security in the buildings. We have a guidance office clerical at High School East. We had a paraprofessional who was working a little bit out of function and really wasn't serving the needs of the students, so it would be replacing that person with a clerical person at the guidance office at High School East. We have a speech therapist, again because of caseloads, we're looking for a one full-time equivalent speech therapist. And then an instructional technology support person. That's not a teacher, it's a person who works with the teachers to ensure that the technology is working, that the technology is being integrated into the curriculum. So all of that, the net budget effect of all of that is $150,000. Again, incorporated into the budget that we're working on. Our next key driver are the benefit and contributory item areas. And so those are all of our budget areas that we are required by contract or by law to provide. So in terms of healthcare, which is our first big piece, the healthcare expenses are multifaceted in that there are many drivers within those expenditure areas that make it a complex area to project, but we do our very best at making all of these components work together to be able to get to a realistic number. So the first component that we have are the employee contribution rates. Our employees contribute anywhere from 15% to 40% into the premiums. And then also in terms of the premiums, what we know and what we don't know. The healthcare programs run on a calendar year. Our budgets run on a fiscal year, so we are off by 6 months every year. So when we budget for the premium increases, we're looking at knowing what 6 months of it could be, but not knowing what the remaining 6 months could be. So we have to do some intelligent projecting and trending to identify the second half of the year. The next piece is we offer two different plans. We have a HIP plan and we have the Empire NYSHIP plan. So what is that mix? When are folks expected to maybe leave the HIP plan because they're not happy with the benefits and possibly migrate over to the NYSHIP plan during an open enrollment period? So we have to continue to manage those pieces because those rates are different. The next component is an individual versus family plan. People's life, their life circumstances change. My kids may be off to college, I may be a single woman, and now I'm going from a family plan to an individual, or vice versa, I may have had some children. So that will impact the cost to the district based on, again, what they're contractually allowed to have, and then based on what plan they choose to take based on that contractual allowance. The next piece is having new versus exiting participants. Again, I am retiring, so I may not any longer be on the plan. I may have terminated my employment for some other reason. So folks coming on, folks going off, we continue to manage those numbers as well. Medicare Part B, that is the the first line of medical coverage for our retirees who are over 65. We are required by law to reimburse that premium. So that premium varies, and then there is also an adjustment that's made for certain of the retirees that we also have to manage too. So again, another budgetary item we need to consider. And then the Affordable Care Act. So we have many components. We have reporting components which cost us money to be able to manage and meet. We also have to offer coverage that's affordable, coverage that's appropriate, and so all of those components we're also working on. And then that ends up bringing us to a healthcare expenditure plan, which I will get to in the next slide or two. When we look at the healthcare expenses for NYSHIP, we look at percents. That's one of the first pieces that we use to project forward our budget. So we have premium increases that you can see dating back to 2009, going up through what we're projecting for 2016. And you can see that the rates for family and individual do vary. With NYSHIP, with HIP, they do not. The rates are the same. But these are the rates that we are working with. And they do vary from year to year. In 2014, NYSHIP acknowledged that the rates were really getting to be very unmanageable. They were up at almost 14%, and then they had gone to an 8%. In that year 2014, they said we're going to self-fund, we're going to try and manage expenses. And they did for that year, and if you remember from last year, I was talking about how the rates have to go up. That's just the nature of healthcare. Even though they tried to mitigate some of the rates, they were going to continue to increase. We saw that in year 2, and we're seeing that in year 3. So we need to project forward what we think that 4th year of self-funded would be for 2017, again, the second half of our fiscal year. When you look at HIP, HIP has the same rate increase for family and individual, it's just how they work it. And the interesting piece on HIP is that about 30% of their participants wasn't a large group overall, but they migrated out of HIP because of the significant rate increase that they saw in 2015. When you look at the total expenses for both of those plans, we're looking at about $27 million, and that's the trending since 2009-10. When you look at pension costs, another significant driver in terms of the budget, we have 2 different systems, New York State Teachers Retirement System and then the New York State Employee Retirement System. The Teachers Retirement System is mandatory. We must enroll every teacher and administrator in this plan. We contribute 8% of salary. That percent is set by the state. We do not set that amount. And the tier determines the benefit to the employee or to the retiree as it may be. Again, we don't determine the benefit. The state determines the benefit for those people. One rate is set each year for every district. So no matter what tier you're in, whether you're a retiree or not, the state has an actuary go through and identify what the one rate will be for every district to contribute. In contrast, the employee retirement system is offered to non-certificated employees. So that's everyone except for teachers and administrators. Contribution rate is also a percent of salary. The tier also determines your benefits. And the rates are set by tier, making it a little bit more complex because the tier that the employee or retiree is in will determine what the contribution rate is. The other component with the employee retirement system is that their fiscal year is different than ours, so we're always kind of chasing ourselves with trying to catch up to their fiscal year and appropriately project those expenses. I'll go through these quickly. I've had these charts in the past. I think they tell a good story. But in terms of the contribution rates, this is what these are the rates as they've been since back in 1978-79. So it is a bit of a roller coaster. We see a high of probably 24% up at the top back in the early 1980s, and then we hit a low in 2002-03. And the rates are going up and they're starting to come down again. Right now they're looking at an increase of 12%. So one of the things that the state will go through and identify is, well, the difference. What is the rate differential? It's 1 percentage point or 2 percentage points. But the reality is when you go from a 12% rate to a 13% rate, that is truly 1 percentage point. But when you look at the percent impact on our budget, this is actually what the impact is. So the spikes that we go through when we're trying to budget for TRS or ERS based on the contribution rates, this is really what we're working through. And so that pink bar is simply a 0%, which means that there is consistency in the rating structure, and that's something that I have always been a proponent of. Collect more when you don't need to, collect less when you do, and it will all level out so that we can have budgeting predictability. This is just simply to show you that we don't have that yet. And so this is an area that we focus a lot of attention on. Go ahead.
So I'm just looking at those last 2 dots. So theoretically, it's a negative 15% or whatever, maybe negative 18%, whatever that second to last dot is. Minus 24.
Yep, that's a minus 24, and then that one is a minus 9. Yep.
So that really is a 15% increase for next year.
It's actually, so it truly is a decrease because when you look at the TRS rates, and you have to really look at the rates to understand what those differences are. But if you're looking at the TRS rates, their rate is going from 13.26 to 12%. That's their estimate.
Okay.
So it truly is a decrease, and they would say, it's a 1.26 percentage point decrease. That works in our favor when it's a decrease. For us, the budget decrease is really a factor of 9%. It's bigger than what that percentage point difference is.
Okay.
The converse is when we have the rates going up, which we know they will always end up getting there again, but when the rates go up, that differential is significant. There was a year not so long ago where 2012-13, the percentage point difference was 4.4 percentage points, simply a subtraction. The impact to us was 37% in terms of year-over-year increase in the rate. So that increase in the rate is really what this is trying to show the story of that makes it difficult because that's truly the impact on our budget, those significant spikes and valleys.
Thank you.
And so I have the same kind of a chart for ERS, which I'll go through. But in essence, the TRS expenses, taking that into account, this is what we're looking at, and we're looking at about $11.5 million for a TRS expense estimate for 2016-17, and that's our trend since 2009-10. ERS, again, these are the rates, so the contribution rates are, they were at a 19.8% back in 78, and then you can see a low in 91, and then right now we're looking at 15.5%, and that's a blended rate. So I mentioned that the ERS rates are unique by tier. This is a blended rate that they provide, but they are different by tier. So that's going down, which is also very helpful for us, but it is still 15% of the salaries we need to contribute. And again, the spiking that we see, which is the same methodology that we just went through for TRS. That would be the flat line, and we do see the big spikes above or below. So that 1 year in 2011-12, we saw a 61% increase. That was probably a 4 percentage point increase that was promoted, but for us it actually was a 61% increase, a swing in terms of how that impacts our budget. So we are looking at the decrease for next year, which we're very thankful for, and that's helping us to balance our budget. ERS expenses, again, similar to the TRS, a much smaller population. We're looking at just about $5 million as our estimate for next year. Social Security, that's one of our contributory benefit areas because we must pay into Social Security as an employer, as all employers need to. So this is simply a percent of salary, and as we go through, and there are certain triggers that if you're over a certain salary, we don't contribute into it. So when we go through and evaluate, we're seeing a slight decline in terms of our Social Security expenditure outlay for 2016-17, just over $9 million. Unemployment, we had a point in time, not so long ago, that we were accessing. So we saw a spike in our unemployment expenses, and thankfully we're in a good place that we don't have to access, other than I had mentioned one for enrollment. But we're looking at an estimate that we continue to level off. The challenge with unemployment is that we pay dollar for dollar. So when we have employees who are no longer with the district go to the unemployment board, we have a very aggressive, very well-run process that Dr. Harrigan and I work through with our benefits office to be able to contest some of the claims. We are very successful. I think we're at a 92% success rate on those contested claims, which is causing us to bring these benefits, this expenditure down. We don't want to not give benefits to those who deserve it, but we truly want to fight those who are trying to get benefits who don't. And that is indicative of the rate that we're seeing there, that decline. When you look at facilities and capital projects, we have had discussion already about the capital projects, but I'll take you through what we're looking at for next year. This past year, we had our high school west tennis courts completed. We're looking at high school east tennis courts. We always try to include in an interior building project with the exterior projects for aid. So we're looking at the high school east passive air vents to work on some, the vents don't work, and some of them don't work, and therefore they are not circulating fresh air throughout the space. And because we have them covered, because they're not functioning, they're beyond their useful life, we end up also having some leaks. So we're going to be addressing those first. So those are the two projects at high school east. Natatorium, infrastructure, nothing to make it pretty, but things to keep that building running. So some masonry repairs, we have marble dusting that we need to do, the pool, the sump, the filtration system needs to be updated. So we have a list of projects under the natatorium to be able to address or keep solid. High school west gym doors. Gym doors take a lot of beating from just by the nature of what area they are closing off. So we have the gym doors at High School West, which are beyond repair. They don't shut correctly. There is a gap between the outside space in the hallway and getting into the gym. So that's a problem from an ADA perspective. We have hinges that have been repaired multiple times, door handles, the frames. They are beyond repair, beyond what we can fix anymore. So we're going to be replacing those. Candlewood, we have continual issues with the fire marshal. The fire enclosure doors at the Candlewood, in the Candlewood stairwells don't serve as fire enclosure doors. The fire marshal has cited us for years, so we need to get that done to have those doors functioning in the event that we needed them to function as fire enclosure doors. Sunquam, we have a rear water challenge because of the topography of the area. Back in the back wing of Sunquam, you have ground that is higher that falls down into the building essentially. So we're looking to put some drainage along the building so that when we have heavy rainfall or snow, and we don't have any infiltration into the building itself. So that is part of a multi-year project to address that topography issue we have there. Signal Hill, ceiling tile replacement, the final placement of asbestos tiles. We're looking to finally replace all that. That will be the final one district-wide. And then as money permits, athletic lockers. We know our locker spaces are in some dire need of repair, so we will be improving those as money permits. From a facilities perspective, outside of the capital projects, which are specifically delineated, we have a $1.1 million budget impact in facilities, and I'll take you through each of those components. Budget leveling. You obviously know, and if the community comes to the board meetings, they would know, many months throughout the year, I am requesting budget transfers from another budget code that has surplus into the facilities budget to be able to address work orders, emergency projects, whatever the case may be for our aging facilities. We have 14 facilities. We have a handful of gentlemen who take care of our facilities, and we have some contracted work out as well for that which we can't handle. So what I'm looking to do is I've addressed the trending. It doesn't seem like it's going away, so I'm looking to finally level that budget so that the budget is appropriately funded, so that I either eliminate completely any budget transfer requests or I minimize them to a level that's more manageable. So that is the first piece. Field irrigation. Our fields are used all the time. We have very little opportunity to rehabilitate the fields, so one of the pieces that we're looking to do is to irrigate our fields, in-ground sprinkler systems at our secondary buildings where our fields are. Building exterior signage. We're looking to have standardized, updated exterior building signs at our elementary buildings. They are cracked, they've been repaired, they are inconsistent. We're looking to have one very professional look to our signage. And then the middle schools both have outdated, non-functioning, not attractive signs in the front of their buildings identifying the buildings. So we're looking to update that with electronic signage at the middle schools. Part of that bottom item could potentially be funded or assisted with some PTA funding. We've already been having some initial conversations with the building principals. The West Hollow atrium, we are doing the atrium project that was approved last year, or maybe it was the year prior. We had gotten the approval, we've started some of the preliminary work. So we're going to have a brand new beautiful atrium on the top. We're going to look at updating some of the flooring, which we had hoped to be included as part of the project, but we simply didn't have the funding once we went out to bid. So we're looking to have that atrium flooring improved to be able to match the beautiful atrium space that will now exist after this summer when we complete the project. And then the high school east auditorium, again, our main space for all of our big events. We're looking to purchase a new stage sick. That's a short word for a longer word, but ultimately a cyclorama is what it's called. Essentially, it's a backdrop that is used by the theater program to create, do you like that? Pretty impressive, right? Not a theater person. I don't know if I pronounced it even right, but it's going to be able to, the one that we have is not functioning, so when we have theater productions, we are unable to have a certain sky setting or any depth perspective in the theater program, so they have to do a lot of improvising with their stage sets. So that is something that was identified by one of our folks who has helped us to manage the theater program and the auditorium space as one of the most important needs for the theater program. And then we're also looking to address the acoustics in the auditorium. It's not a significant budget add in terms of what that space probably needs, but it should help to improve the acoustics in that auditorium. And we're going to be working with our architects on that project as well to see what we could get the biggest bang for our buck on.
Can I just ask one question?
Sure.
Since you're switching.
Yeah.
What the building exterior signage?
Yeah.
What is the approximate cost of that?
Sure. Give me 1 second. I believe for the
I know you said we might be able to get some
Yep,
of that different.
on the middle schools, absolutely. So at the elementary level, I'm estimating about $10,000 for the production and install for each sign at the elementary levels. And then for the middle schools, because they're electronic signs, we're looking at $25,000 per sign. And there was some conversation at West Hollow initially that there was going to be some money either for the beautification around the area or to assist in the purchase of those signs.
Thank you.
At West Hollow, that was the first conversation we had had.
Thank you.
Sure.
I got a question about the auditorium.
Yeah.
one of the concerns I have is if anything that we do to manage the acoustics or the auditorium, are there issues with the code because we don't have access ways through that, or is that really if the whole thing's completely
Correct.
done?
Correct,
So-
Dr. Peller. If we were to engage in a reconstruction project, we were going to replace the seating because the seating was old, we would likely not be grandfathered into that.
Okay, but any kind of acoustics that
Correct.
we can do, okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
all right, thanks.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Looking at debt service, this is an area that we are always managing. We're either refinancing our debt when possible or paying down our debt when possible with surplus. But as a result of those two efforts, we have bond payments that are less than what we've seen in the past. So as you continue to pay off your debt, kind of like your mortgage, your principal and interest continues to decline. That, as well as our refinancing, as well as our paying down of debt with surplus, has enabled us to have bond payments that are about $300,000 less than what we have this year. So that's a nice savings for us. And then the TAN interest, because of our net worth, which is our the value, the dollar amount of our fund balance, we're looking at having rates and an interest rate market truly that is very beneficial for us to borrow. But when we have to borrow for short-term borrowing because of cash flow, we're looking at rates that are 0.25%. So we're bringing down that budget code as well to reflect the rates that we've been seeing the past couple of years. So total savings in that debt service code is going to be $600,000. In equipment, we have a number of main areas that I've categorized our equipment requests in. So instructionally, we're looking at many different discipline areas receiving new equipment, new music equipment, phys ed equipment, and so on. Probably the two general areas are special ed and nursing, which I would tell you that I don't have a detail of what exactly they're looking to buy because those two areas are specific to the student's needs. So as an IEP is developed or as a nurse identifies a student's needs, they may say, I need a particular type of equipment. So we always put money in those two codes for meeting the student needs. So I couldn't tell you exactly what they're looking to buy today. I would have to tell you that throughout the next fiscal year. But we've received requests and submitted into our budget instructional equipment items from those areas. MIS, Management Information Systems. We have our standard servers, switches, computers, and printers, which are managed through MIS, keeping our infrastructure moving. Security, we are always upgrading our cameras and DVRs, adding more where we need coverage, as well as the smart badge system that we're looking to fully roll out at the secondary buildings as soon as physically possible, but we have some more pieces still to get through on that. And then facilities, we have many requests from the buildings which we manage and prioritize. Cafeteria tables, entrance mats, you walk into and it captures all the dirt. Aerial work platforms, those genie lifts for the maintenance and custodians to do their work at a higher level when they need to do work in certain spaces. Mechanical systems equipment, which may fail, which we need to replace. It is truly equipment components. Cleaning equipment, snow removal equipment, lawn maintenance equipment, all of that comes from our facilities budget in the equipment. And Mr. Feedy, our facilities administrator, is continuing to prioritize those items, and then we'll begin the purchasing pending an approved budget. And then the final main driver for our budget for this upcoming year is in busing. So we have a core set of buses internally. We have about 50 routes. The remaining of our routes, multiplier of that, is contracted out through Educational Bus. We're in the middle of a multi-year contract with them. But suffice it to say that either through special ed needs, through our regular education, general ed students, we have varying needs on busing. We may need to adjust a route, split a route because of time. There may be students who aren't getting along, and the only way we can solve that issue is to create separate routes for students and reevaluate our existing stops. So all of those types of things require us to have some money in the budget to be able to meet those varying needs for students. That added to the third year of our extension in our transportation contract with Educational Bus, who have been wonderful to work with. The third year of that, we have a CPI or a 4% increase. That is what was negotiated, so not knowing what the CPI is, I've projected forward on the max of that level, the 4%. And then this year, instead of requesting multiple large buses, as Mr. Troy has requested in the past, he's constantly reevaluating our fleet, and he has asked for a new tow truck. The tow truck that we have for transportation, which tows our facilities vehicles and also tows our buses. That tow truck is 27 years old, and it is beyond its useful life, but probably more importantly, it is doing damage to our vehicles when it tows our buses. We bought it when we didn't have any 72 passenger buses, and so it's a different, I have a whole memo on it, more than I ever wanted to know about tow trucks, but it's a different way. You're ruining the chassis when you're putting on a much heavier bus, a much longer bus onto a tow truck that wasn't designed for that. So he has asked, actually last year as well, he asked for that, but we had 3 new buses last year, so I told him to hold off. And he's also asking for 2 new mini buses. Essentially, that's a flat, his equipment code from this current year is going to be flat for next year. There's no increase. But the tow truck and the 2 new mini buses, the mini buses we have in-house to get down cul-de-sacs, dead ends, where our regular sized buses can't get down. So that total impact for the transportation code is going to be about $400,000. In terms of what's to come, we continue to work on staffing. The staffing is really a very exhaustive process of our entire budget exercise. We have presentations coming up in April, the budget adoption, and then we begin our affectionately called roadshow. The board adopts on the 18th, and then after that point, the budget is what the budget is. On the 18th, I will have more information. I will put everything together. We've talked about the revenues. I've explained the key drivers in terms of expenditures, but we'll be able to talk about how that all comes together. I've given you the property tax levy cap figure. I've given you the estimate budget to budget, and we're going to see where all of that lands. That's the final work that we're doing now. And then the trustee vote and board election budget vote is May 17th. So that is my update for this evening. You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Morrow. Are there any questions from the Board of Education?
We have any,
I'm sorry.
like, I know we talked about like the GEA, somebody.
No, we have nothing updated. We are expecting a state-approved budget in a week. What we do know is that both houses released their proposals, and my understanding is that both included a full restoration of GEA. So I am very hopeful that it will happen. And if it doesn't, then we will tap into our reserves. So there won't be a different, version of without GEA. It simply will be, we'll use reserves because that's what they're there for. So,
Okay,
yeah, but nothing updated.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Thank you very much, Ms. Caliendo. So then we can move into the business portion of the meeting. Minutes from the meeting on March 7th. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Great. Great. Next one, any correspondence?
Yes. The Board of Education received a letter regarding paraprofessional negotiations. The Board of Education also received a letter from Strong East Ramapo regarding asking for the Board of Education support to authorize state oversight of the East Ramapo Central School District in Spring Valley, New York. The board also received a letter from the town of Babylon regarding proposed change of zoning by Gustav Wade.
Any comments on that? Great. Board committees? Great.
Just one thing,
Oh, sure.
just wanted to make everybody aware that the letter that the Board of Education wrote to the Department of the Board of Elections
Perfect.
is on the Facebook page. I'm sorry, not the Facebook page, it's on the
Actual
on the
website?
yes.
Yep, okay, great.
So what did the Board of Elections do with the information?
We haven't, as of today, we haven't gotten any information yet, but hopefully soon.
The Board of Elections is in receipt of the correspondence from the school district. They have been back into the district to look at the spaces again that Ms. Caliendo and I had walked with them during the summer. So the board will actually be receiving some information shortly regarding their findings.
So do they just respond back and give a verdict, or do we have an appeal process, or do we?
No, we don't have a verdict yet. but I'm hopeful that that verdict will be coming shortly.
And the fact that they're taking another look may be a good sign, I
How long ago did they take another look?
How,
How long ago did they take another look?
a couple weeks ago? A couple weeks ago, yes.
don't know. So at least they
They're not a
got letter.
fast-moving organization, no.
But the letter got some action, which is
Yes,
great.
absolutely.
So that really is, that's a win for Half Hollow Hills, so that's great. Any pending or unfinished business? Great. Comments from visitors? And while we're waiting for that, I would like to make note of the fact that Mr. Richard Haas, the Teachers Union President, is in attendance. Lori Levine, the President of the Paris Association, is in attendance. And Wendy Natalone, the President of the PTA Council, is in attendance. So thank you for joining us this evening. Jill Kaufman.
Yes. You said it was $470,000 was for the clubs, the course offerings, the redesigning of the instruction space and the maker space. Is there a breakdown individually for what each of those things cost that add up to the $470,000?
I have it, yep, I just have to calculate it out, I just have to pull it out of multiple documents.
Okay. And the all the flooring and for the for West Hollow, that's all inclusive in the 1.1 million that was for facilities?
If it was on that slide, yes, it was.
Okay. And are the mini buses replacing buses, or are they going to
Yes,
be
we would-
additional?
We would obsolete, no, we would obsolete. The ones that we are replacing are over 16 years old, so we would be obsoleting those buses.
Okay. And the security guards, are they going to be additional employees, or are we going to make current security guards the heads of certain
My
areas?
hope is that we have a well-integrated security guard base in our buildings. We have our go-tos who are really serving in somewhat of a quasi-supervisory capacity now. They're the people we call when we have an issue at a building to say what's happening, tell us, they're the eyes and ears there. So my hope is that we would take some of those people who are already inbred in the fabric of those buildings and move them up into these supervisory capacities and then backfill them with a substitute guard, and then once that person, we're comfortable with them, then put them in.
So there would be an additional hiring going on?
Ultimately, it would be someone else who would be, they'd be moved up, and then someone else would be replacing them. I wouldn't look to reduce the number of guards at the buildings.
And do you know offhand, out of the 14 total retirees, how many are teachers?
Yes. You okay, Mrs. Fallon? I can look that up?
Sure.
We have, I'm going to put them in the teacher category, but we do have a number of guidance department folks. So I have, of the 14, I have one principal, I have one director, I have one coordinator, I have 2 custodians, and then the rest are teachers. And Ms. Kaufman, your first question was
About the
which
400,
slide?
well, I have 2 questions in regard to the money. The 470,000, the breakdown, and also the 1.1 million, the breakdown.
Okay, yep, let me just work on that.
Okay.
In the instance of time, is that something, Mrs. Kaufman, that Ms. Marone Caliendo can get to you individually?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, but I have other questions too,
Okay.
if you don't mind. Maybe Mr. O'Farrell, this is probably a good question for you. They talked about at the last meeting, the recording studio at High School East. Now, it was raised about whether High School West students could go there and take courses and use the studio. So I'm like wondering how feasible that is, because, you know, also at the planetarium, are there students at High School West that are able to like leave maybe a few minutes early, go over there, take a course in the planetarium and then maybe come back 5 minutes late. It doesn't seem like students are doing that, or are there some that do that? And is it feasible?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have, each year, we have students going either way. Some years, so AP Statistics is the first one that comes to mind. It's a course that we don't have a huge enrollment, unfortunately, at either building. So some years, some students from West might go to East, some years, students from East might go to West. We try to structure the schedule so that the classes where we do have people traveling are either first or ninth period, so that if they're only really late to one class, and we usually work it out so that there's a shuttle that goes back and forth, but students can leave class, as you said, a couple minutes early, and then they get to class a couple minutes late, and it's usually not a problem.
So then you could do the same thing with
Same thing, yep,
this as
yep.
well?
It's just a matter of trying to figure out, looking at requests, which is kind of where we are in the process right now, looking at requests for each building, seeing what courses are going to run, and then trying to put those courses in places in the day, in periods where kids can get them.
And do you think like in the future, you might foresee putting it in High School West as well? If it's successful at High School East?
If it's successful.
And there's room or space
Yeah,
at High
if-
School West?
If we get to a point where there's room, the issue right now isn't necessarily interest, it's really the space at High School West. High School West is a smaller building, obviously. But if it's successful and kids are signing up for it each year, it might make sense at some point to put something in there.
Right, because even with declining enrollment, if one became a middle school, it would be at both levels then.
Right, yeah, we'd have to see what type of interest. Obviously it's a brand new program, so, you know, we're trying to start a little bit small with the classes that would be accessing it on a kind of daily or weekly basis, but we'll see, yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mrs. Kaufman. I'll turn the meeting over now to Mrs. Fallon.
Thank you, Mr. Garingswald. Dr. Harrigan?
Thank you, Mrs. Fallon. This evening, my report contains a certificated, non-certificated, as well as additional compensation report.
Can I ask for a motion to take the report in its entirety?
Motion?
Do we have a second? Second. Any comments or questions?
There's just one name on the list. I'm friends with this person, had no idea she'd be on the list, had nothing to do with it. So I just feel that I'm obliged to let everyone know that. But I'm grateful that she's in on this.
And I feel, there's a name on the list that I happen to know as well. Any other comments? All those in favor of taking the report in its entirety? Great. Motion to approve the report in its entirety? Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fallon. My first item tonight are budget transfers, as detailed in Appendix A.
Do we have a motion?
Motion?
Do we have a second? Second. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Great.
Thank you. My second item are the health service contracts with Hop Hog Public Schools and South Huntington Public Schools.
Great. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Great.
Earlier this month, we accepted the generous donation of the teacher grants through the Hills Foundation. So this month, in my report, I'm looking to receive the check from the Hills Foundation to then replenish the codes which we utilize to purchase the items that were covered through the grants. So what we do is we purchase the items which are consistent with what was approved in the grant. We purchase them directly. We typically get a better price than anyone could get individually, and then we request the funding back from the Hills Foundation consistent with what was approved. So it's more just of a moving of money.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Motion. Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Great.
My next item is a donation of 8 mini iPads for Candlewood Middle School to be used in Mrs. Kaplan's life skills class, being donated by a parent of a student in that class. She received the iPads through the Nassau-Suffolk Autism Society of America, and she is passing those on to the district.
That's great. Very nice. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Great.
And also in the spirit of generosity, we have a donation of 2 smartboards from Sunquam Elementary School PTA to Sunquam. we are looking to approve the receipt of the money to be able to purchase the smart boards and accessories.
Great, do we have a motion?
Motion. Second?
Great, any comments or questions? I just have a question, not for today, but just something, do we know what percentage of, or can we find out kind of what the percentage of rooms with smart boards are? I think we've got to be pretty high. So,
We can find out.
yeah, again, I just think that, you know, that the whole STEM education thing, and, you know, we really are, it's impressive, and so much of it has been donated by the community. It really is nice to see that. All those in favor? Great.
The next item is disposal of equipment. We have some old printers here, located physically here at this building, that we're looking to dispose of in the best interest of the district.
Great, do we have a motion?
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Great,
And that is all. Thank you.
thank you.
Mrs. Vitale?
For the board's approval this evening, I have recommendations from the Committee on Preschool Special Education.
Do we have a motion?
Motion?
Do we have a second?
Second.
Great, any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Mrs. Fallon. This evening I have two items for the board's consideration. First is the list of recommendations by the Committee for Special Education.
Great, do we have a motion?
Motion.
A second? Okay. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Great.
And the second item is a consultant contract with the Hauppauge Public School District to serve as a district of location.
Great, do we have a motion?
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Martin?
Thank you, Mrs. Fallon. This evening, we have a total of 14 policies, 10 of which are for second reading and 4 are up for first reading. I'll begin with the policies up for second reading. They were held a first reading on March 7th. First is policy 8130, school safety plans and teams. It outlines the board's responsibilities under the Schools Against Violence in Education Act. It's a first reading. This is a new policy. Policy 8220, buildings and grounds maintenance and inspection. This is an update from New York State School Boards Association, but it also replaces existing policy 8431. Policy 8334, the use of credit cards. This is again an update, replacing an existing policy 6451. Policy 8400, transportation. This is an update and replaces policy 8600. Policy 8410, student transportation. This policy is an update and replaces 8610. Policy 8411 on school bus scheduling and routing. This is an update and it replaces policy 8600.1. Policy 8414.4, video cameras on the bus. This is a policy and it updates an existing and it's replacing policy 8630. This is one area where we're starting to see some overlap. We've adopted some new policies with the numbering of 8630, but this is the old 8630 in the system, so it would replace 8630. In the school boards, in their methodology, they have some different numbering than the prior policies, so that one is a little bit confusing. Policy 8414.5, alcohol and drug testing for bus drivers. That's a new policy for us. Policy 8500, food service management, replaces 8510, and 8501 for the nutrition program replaces 8500. We can take a motion to waive the literal reading.
Motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Great.
And we need a motion to adopt policies 8130, 8220, 8334, 8400, 8410, 8411, 8414.4, 8414.5, 8500, and 8501.
Great. Do we have a motion to adopt those policies?
Motion?
Do we have a second? Second. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Great.
And then lastly, a motion to abolish policies 8431, 6451, 8600, 8610, 8600.1, 8510, and 8500.
Do we have a motion to abolish those policies?
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
And then we had 4 new policies, so these are first reads. The first is an amendment to policy 1120 on school district records. This came as an update. This is not a new policy, and it relates to district information on computer resources. So we talked about the really things that changed since we last adopted the policy, like cloud computing and things like that. Next policy is 2270 on school attorneys. Again, this is not a new policy. The amendments is update the policy to clarify the relationship between the board and the school attorney. Policy 4710 on grading systems due to school district audits by the Office of State Controller regarding security of district information on computer resources. The big thing there is they look for clarification of who has the authority to, like for in our district, to view grades on Infinite Campus, or to input grades or make grade changes. And policy 6900, disposal of district equipment. Again, this was an updated policy to reflect recommendations from the state controller. And this really outlined that we should be wiping computers of any confidential information prior to disposing of them in any capacity. So this is a first policy. It replaces an existing policy 7290. So it's not a new policy, but it's an update and renumbering. Just a motion to waive the literal reading for these.
Do we have a motion to waive the literal reading of those 4 policies? Motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Great.
And the second reading will be on April 18th, 2016.
Thank you very much, Dr.
We just have one policy that we did a first reading of at the last meeting, but we're gonna hold off on second reading tonight because the policy committee is gonna meet in April to discuss it a little bit further. If anybody has any questions, feel free to contact us.
Great, thank you very much. Request from the Board of Education.
I had something I mentioned 2 weeks ago at our meeting. I know it was a long meeting then, and it's a long meeting now, so I don't know if that'll ever be a good time. If Mr. Fowle can just briefly just update the board, because I thought it was an important issue, and I think it's been resolved, but I think everybody's going to update it. That's with the testing, with the math booklets.
Right, so at the middle school level in LA and math, right now we have 6th, 7th, 8th grade teachers that are using essentially booklets of test questions that they've asked for, the Common Core standards. The teachers are faced with really creating new questions, new sample questions to mirror the Common Core. In math in particular, a lot of the questions are word problems, and our math teachers, we all know, we didn't take math courses like that. They're not entirely comfortable creating problems like that use the correct type of distractors, for example, in multiple choice questions, and are creating questions that are at the appropriate level of vocabulary. So the teachers have asked for these resources, and we went through a process. We looked at a variety of different booklets, different things on Engage New York, and we've put these resources together, and they have been distributed to students, so students are seeing these things. The district hasn't taken the position that we want this done as test prep. We're really viewing it as a part of the curriculum at the request of the teachers, so that really we're looking at quality questions, and that they can model their questions in the future as they do create them. They can model them after these types of questions. But we anticipate using this throughout the year. We did get a little bit of a late start this year, but it's expected that in the future they'll be handed out just as we are still using hard copy textbooks. If textbooks are distributed, they would be handed out as well, and certainly to be used after the exams. So just to clarify.
Great. Thank you. Board counsel?
You know my motto is no news.
That's great. Any new business? Second comments from visitors? Joe Kaufman.
Out of the 9 teachers that are retiring, are any of them being replaced, or they're not because of declining
No,
enrollment?
they're being replaced.
Oh, they are,
So the savings is the differential.
okay. From the new salaries from
Correct.
the old ones,
Correct.
okay. And also the breakdowns for the 470,000 and 1.1 million, also want it for the 2.4 million as well. So do you know when I would be able?
2.4 for the.
Million in capital projects.
Okay, sure.
Do you know when I would be able to get?
Sometime tomorrow?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, I
fine.
just have to, I have some of my
Sure, no
breakdowns at the desk.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second? All those in favor? You have a good evening, everyone, get home safe.